Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive into the forgotten complexities of ancient governance. Tonight, we're exploring something truly fascinating: the Persian Empire's satrap system and the delicate dance of fiscal autonomy that kept the ancient world's largest empire functioning for over 2 centuries. Before we settle into this journey through administrative corridors and palace chanceries, take a moment to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy these explorations of institutional history, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what draws you to these quieter aspects of ancient civilizations. I always find it remarkable how our global community comes together to examine these intricate systems that shaped human societies long before our modern world took shape. Now get comfortable, dim those lights, and let your mind prepare for a gentle journey through time. Tonight, we're not chasing dramatic battles or royal scandals. Instead, we're examining something far more subtle yet equally profound: how the largest empire in ancient history managed to govern through controlled decentralization, creating a system where local autonomy and imperial control existed in perpetual, productive tension. This is the story of administrative genius, of bureaucratic innovation that would influence governance structures for millennia to come. Let's begin our quiet exploration of the satrap system and discover how ancient Persia solved problems that continue to challenge modern states. The pre-dawn hours in Persepolis during the reign of Darius I revealed an empire in constant motion, a vast administrative machine that operated across time zones and cultural boundaries with remarkable efficiency. As the first light touched the towering columns of the Apadana, royal secretaries were already at work preparing the daily dispatches that would soon travel along the empire's extensive road network to 23 different satrapies stretching from the Indus River Valley to the shores of the Aegean Sea. Each satrap represented not merely a territorial division, but a complex experiment in balancing imperial authority with local autonomy, central coordination with regional flexibility. The word satrap itself, derived from the Old Persian kishathrapavan, meaning protector of the realm, embodied the fundamental paradox of the Persian administrative system. These officials were simultaneously imperial representatives, enforcing royal will, and regional leaders responsible for the welfare and prosperity of their territories. This dual role required a delicate balance of loyalties and responsibilities that demanded both political skill and administrative sophistication of the highest order. The success of the entire empire depended on how effectively individual satraps could navigate the complex terrain between imperial demands and local needs. Consider the morning routine of Artaphernes, satrap of Lydia around 510 BCE, as he began his daily administration of one of the empire's wealthiest and most strategically important provinces. Rising before dawn in his palace at Sardis, the ancient capital that had once been the seat of Lydian kings, he would begin each day by reviewing 3 distinct categories of correspondence that reflected the multiple dimensions of his authority. First came reports from local city administrators throughout his territory, detailing everything from tax collections and market conditions to public works projects and civil disputes requiring his attention. These documents, written in local languages and following traditional Lydian administrative formats, connected him to the immediate concerns and needs of the populations under his governance. The second category consisted of the communications from Persian military commanders stationed throughout the satrap, providing intelligence about frontier security, troop movements, diplomatic developments in neighboring territories, and the constant flow of information that kept the empire's defensive networks functioning effectively. These military dispatches, typically written in Aramaic, using imperial administrative protocols, reminded Artafernes daily of his role as an imperial official responsible for maintaining Persian authority and protecting imperial interests in his assigned territory. The third type of correspondence came directly from the royal court at Persepolis, containing policy directives, requests for information, responses to previous reports, and the complex web of communications that linked all parts of the empire to central authority. These royal communications, bearing the seals and authentication marks that confirmed their authenticity, carried the weight of imperial law and the expectations of the King of Kings himself. In the space of a single morning's correspondence review, Artafernes inhabited 3 overlapping worlds: local governor attending to regional needs, imperial administrator implementing royal policy, and autonomous ruler exercising discretionary authority within carefully defined boundaries. The physical architecture of a satrap's residence reflected these multiple roles and the complex cultural negotiations required for effective governance. The palace at Sardis, like other major satrapal centers throughout the empire, combined Persian ceremonial spaces with local architectural traditions in ways that honored both imperial authority and regional identity. Visitors entering through the main gatehouse would encounter impressive Persian-style reception halls adorned with royal imagery, imperial symbols, and the standardized decorative elements that proclaimed Persian sovereignty. These spaces served important diplomatic and administrative functions, providing appropriate settings for official ceremonies, imperial announcements, and meetings with representatives from other parts of the empire. But deeper within the palace complex lay meeting rooms and administrative offices designed according to Lydian architectural traditions and decorated in styles that local aristocrats and merchants would find familiar and welcoming. These spaces weren't simply diplomatic courtesy, they represented conscious policy decisions about the importance of cultural comfort in effective governance. When local business leaders, religious authorities, or community representatives met with satrapal officials, they did so in environments that respected their traditions while clearly demonstrating Persian power and authority. The satrap's private quarters often incorporated architectural and decorative elements from multiple cultural traditions, creating cosmopolitan living spaces that embodied the empire's multicultural character. Persian carpets might adorn floors designed according to Lydian architectural principles, while walls displayed artwork representing traditions from across the empire. These personal spaces weren't simply expressions of individual taste. They were diplomatic tools that demonstrated the satrap's familiarity with and respect for the diverse cultures within his territory while maintaining his identity as a Persian official. This architectural fusion extended throughout the administrative infrastructure of major satrapal centers. The palace chanceries, where daily government business was conducted, accommodated multiple languages, writing systems, and bureaucratic traditions within unified administrative processes. A typical day in Artafernes' chancery involved documents prepared in Greek for communications with Western Anatolian cities, Lydian for local administrative business, Aramaic for imperial communications, and often additional languages for specialized diplomatic or commercial purposes. Scribes trained in multiple writing systems worked alongside translators, legal experts familiar with various legal traditions, and administrative specialists who understood the complex relationships between imperial policy and local custom. The morning tax assessment sessions in the satrap's palace revealed the sophisticated financial mechanisms that kept the empire functioning while maintaining regional prosperity. Each satrap received annual tribute requirements from the royal treasury, but the methods of collection and the internal distribution of fiscal responsibilities remained largely at satrapal discretion. This flexibility wasn't simply administrative convenience, it represented recognition that the empire's vast territories encompassed dramatically different economic systems, seasonal patterns, and resource bases that required customized approaches to revenue generation. Artifernes might choose to maintain existing Lydian tax structures, incorporating them wholesale into Persian requirements and simply redirecting a portion of traditional revenues to imperial rather than local purposes. Alternatively, he might implement modifications that better served both local economic health and imperial fiscal needs, perhaps adjusting collection timing to match regional agricultural cycles or modifying assessment methods to account for changing trade patterns. Some satraps developed sophisticated revenue-sharing arrangements with local temples, merchant guilds, and aristocratic families, creating stakeholder relationships that strengthened support for Persian rule while ensuring adequate imperial revenues. The genius of this fiscal flexibility lay in its recognition of economic diversity across the empire's vast territories. The agricultural abundance of Mesopotamian river valleys required fundamentally different administrative approaches than the trade-dependent economies of Phoenician coastal cities or the pastoral wealth of Central Asian steppes. Rather than imposing uniform taxation systems that might prove catastrophically inappropriate for local conditions, the Persian approach allowed satraps to develop revenue collection methods that worked within existing economic and social structures while still meeting imperial requirements. This administrative pragmatism extended to religious and cultural policies throughout the satrapies. Mourning ceremonies in Artafernes' palace routinely included Persian fire rituals honoring Ahura Mazda alongside traditional Lydian religious observances honoring local deities. This wasn't mere diplomatic courtesy or political calculation. It represented conscious policy, recognizing that legitimate authority in diverse societies required respect for local spiritual traditions. By maintaining and participating in local religious practices while also promoting Persian religious customs, satraps built cultural legitimacy that purely foreign rule could never achieve. The economic implications of this cultural tolerance proved profound for regional prosperity and imperial revenues alike. Local merchants and artisans continued operating within familiar legal and commercial frameworks, maintaining trade relationships and production methods that had developed over centuries of local experience. Persian rule enhanced rather than disrupted these economic networks, with satraps serving as facilitators and protectors of commercial activity rather than extractive overlords seeking maximum immediate profit. The famous Persian tolerance for local customs wasn't simply enlightened policy, it was shrewd economics, recognizing that long-term prosperity required stability and that stability emerged from continuity rather than radical disruption. Military administration within the satrapies revealed another layer of the system's sophisticated balance between central control and regional autonomy. Each satrap commanded local military forces recruited primarily from their own territories, but these regional armies operated alongside Persian garrison troops stationed at strategic locations throughout the satrapies. The morning military briefings in Sardis typically included reports from both Lydian auxiliary units familiar with local terrain, tactical conditions, and potential threats, and Persian regular forces trained in imperial military doctrine and responsible for maintaining loyalty to central authority. This dual military structure created multiple layers of security and redundancy that strengthened rather than weakened imperial control. Local forces provided intimate knowledge of regional geographic and political conditions that external troops could never possess, while Persian garrisons ensured that regional military capabilities remained aligned with imperial interests. The system also created career opportunities for local military leaders within imperial service, providing pathways for ambitious individuals to advance through merit while serving Persian interests. The training and preparation of satraps themselves reflected the empire's commitment to administrative excellence and cultural competence. Most satraps were drawn from Persian noble families, but their education included extensive preparation for governing the specific territories they would administer. A future satrap of Egypt would spend years studying Egyptian law, religious practices, economic systems, and administrative traditions before assuming office. This intensive preparation created administrators who were simultaneously Persian nobles committed to imperial interests and regional experts capable of governing effectively within local contexts. The communication networks binding the satrapies to central authority represented one of the ancient world's most sophisticated information management systems. The famous Persian postal relay system, which could carry urgent messages from Sardis to Persepolis in just over a week, enabled levels of administrative coordination previously impossible across such vast distances. But the system's true innovation lay not simply in speed, but in its capacity for nuanced, bidirectional communication that kept the empire responsive to changing conditions throughout its territories. These communication channels carried far more than administrative directives and policy announcements. They facilitated continuous dialogue between center and periphery that allowed the empire to adapt quickly to regional developments, economic changes, security threats, and opportunities for expansion or improvement. When drought threatened agricultural production in particular territories, rapid communication allowed for coordinated responses, including tax adjustments, grain imports from surplus regions, public works projects to provide employment, and other relief measures implemented before crisis could undermine political stability. When new trade opportunities emerged, perhaps the opening of previously hostile territories or the development of new commercial routes, satraps could quickly coordinate with neighboring territories and royal officials to maximize economic benefits for both local populations and imperial revenues. This responsiveness to changing conditions contributed significantly to the empire's longevity and prosperity compared to more rigid administrative systems that couldn't adapt effectively to new circumstances. The palace libraries maintained in major satrapal centers contained remarkable collections that reflected the empire's intellectual diversity and commitment to learning from multiple traditions. In Sardis, scribes and administrators maintained extensive archives of Lydian legal precedents, alongside Persian imperial law codes, administrative guidelines from other satrapies facing similar challenges, and scholarly works representing intellectual traditions from across the known world. These libraries served as practical resources for resolving complex legal and administrative issues, but they also represented the empire's broader commitment to cultural learning and synthesis. When disputes arose that required interpretation of how imperial and local law intersected, perhaps conflicts between Persian colonists and Lydian landowners over property rights, or commercial disagreements involving merchants from multiple cultural backgrounds, satrapal administrators could consult legal precedents from throughout the empire. A land dispute in Lydia might be resolved by reference to similar cases from Bactria, property law principles from Babylonia, and administrative precedents from other territories where comparable conflicts had been successfully addressed. The daily routine of legal administration revealed the system's nuanced approach to justice and its sophisticated understanding of legal pluralism. Morning court sessions in the satrap's palace typically addressed cases involving purely local matters according to traditional Lydian legal procedures, ensuring that local populations could seek justice within familiar frameworks. Afternoon sessions dealt with issues requiring imperial law or involving Persian citizens, while evening consultations with legal advisors from both Persian and local traditions ensured that all decisions reflected appropriate cultural understanding while maintaining consistency with imperial policy. This legal pluralism created judicial environments that felt authentic and fair to local populations while advancing Persian administrative goals and maintaining imperial authority. Rather than simply imposing Persian legal codes that might conflict with local values and expectations, the system developed sophisticated jurisprudence that integrated multiple legal traditions while ensuring consistent treatment of similar cases across different territories. Economic policy development within the satrapies showcased the empire's innovative approach to fostering long-term prosperity rather than maximizing short-term revenue extraction. Persian administrators understood that sustainable tribute collection required healthy regional economies, and they consistently invested in infrastructure and institutional development that enhanced local productive capacity, satraps. Initiated and supervised construction of roads, bridges, irrigation systems, harbor improvements, and other public works that increased regional economic potential while also serving imperial administrative and military needs. The famous Persian road system exemplified this long-term approach to economic development. While these roads obviously served crucial military and administrative functions, enabling rapid troop movements, efficient communication, and effective imperial oversight, their primary economic impact involved facilitating commercial activity that increased prosperity throughout the empire. Regional merchants could transport goods more efficiently, distant markets became accessible to local producers, and commercial information flowed more rapidly, enabling better business decisions and more efficient resource allocation. The morning marketplace activity in Sardis during Artaphernes' tenure exemplified the economic dynamism that Persian policies fostered throughout the empire. Lydian merchants conducted business alongside Persian administrators, Egyptian artisans, Phoenician seafarers, and Scythian metalworkers in commercial environments that accommodated multiple languages, currencies, and trading traditions. The satraps' commercial policies had created frameworks within which diverse economic traditions could interact productively, generating wealth that supported both local communities and imperial administration. Currency policy within the satrapies revealed sophisticated understanding of monetary economics and the importance of accommodating existing commercial practices while gradually integrating regional economies into empire-wide systems. Rather than immediately imposing uniform Persian currency throughout their territories, satraps typically maintained existing local monetary systems while establishing exchange rates and commercial protocols that facilitated inter-regional trade. The prestigious Persian daric served as a standard for major transactions and tribute payments, but local currencies continued circulating for daily commercial activity. This monetary pluralism supported economic stability by allowing established commercial relationships to continue functioning while gradually creating the standardization necessary for efficient long-distance trade. Local merchants could conduct business using familiar currencies and commercial practices, while the availability of standardized imperial currency enabled them to participate in broader economic networks extending across multiple satrapies. Industrial and craft production within the satrapies flourished under Persian policies that encouraged technological innovation and artistic development while respecting regional traditions and maintaining quality standards. Rather than imposing uniform production methods, Persian administration facilitated technology transfer between regions through voluntary adoption and adaptation. Irrigation techniques developed in Mesopotamia were shared with agricultural communities in Bactria and Sogdiana, while metallurgical innovations from Anatolian workshops spread throughout the empire as local craftsmen adapted new methods to their own materials and traditions. The role of women in satrapal administration, while constrained by ancient social norms, nevertheless revealed the system's practical flexibility and willingness to utilize available talent effectively. Satraps' wives often managed palace households that served crucial diplomatic and economic functions, hosting visiting officials from other territories, overseeing ceremonial events that reinforced imperial authority and maintaining communication networks with other administrative centers. These responsibilities required sophisticated political and social skills and provided women with significant influence over imperial policy implementation. Some women inherited administrative responsibilities in their own right, particularly in regions where local traditions supported female authority or where circumstances required flexible approaches to governance. The empire's pragmatic commitment to effective administration meant that competent leadership took precedence over rigid adherence to any single cultural model of appropriate gender roles. Religious administration within the satrapies demonstrated perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of Persian cultural policy and its understanding of the relationship between spiritual legitimacy and political authority. The morning prayers conducted in Artafernes' private chapel honored Ahura Mazda according to Persian tradition, but the same palace complex contained shrines to Lydian deities maintained according to local customs and staffed by traditional priests following ancient rituals. This religious pluralism wasn't confusion or compromise. It was deliberate policy, recognizing that political authority in diverse societies required spiritual legitimacy that could only be achieved through respect for local religious traditions. Satraps served simultaneously as protectors of local temples and promoters of Persian religious practices, creating environments where multiple spiritual traditions could coexist and mutually reinforce rather than undermine political stability. The education and training of administrative staff within the satrapies created unique intellectual environments that blended Persian imperial traditions with local knowledge and cosmopolitan perspectives from throughout the empire. Young men preparing for administrative careers studied Persian history, law, and governmental principles, but also immersed themselves in local cultural traditions and often learned additional languages and customs from other parts of the empire. This comprehensive educational approach produced administrators capable of navigating complex multicultural environments while maintaining loyalty to Persian imperial ideals. The integration of diverse populations within satrapal territories required particularly nuanced policies that accommodated different economic systems, social structures, and cultural practices within unified administrative frameworks. The morning reports reaching Artafernes' desk included updates from settled agricultural communities alongside intelligence from nomadic tribal leaders moving through the territory with their herds according to seasonal migration patterns. Rather than forcing nomadic populations into settled lifestyles that would disrupt their economic systems and cultural traditions, Persian administration developed policies that accommodated seasonal migration while maintaining security and collecting appropriate tribute. This flexible approach prevented the destructive conflicts between nomadic and settled populations that plagued many other ancient empires, and created instead cooperative relationships that benefited all parties. Agricultural administration revealed the empire's sophisticated understanding of regional economic diversity and the importance of adapting policies to local environmental and social conditions. The fertile river valleys of Mesopotamia required different agricultural policies than the highland farming communities of the Iranian plateau or the pastoral societies of Central Asian steppes. Satraps worked with local farmers, landowners, and agricultural experts to develop policies that increased productivity while respecting traditional farming practices and maintaining social stability. The famous Persian paradise gardens weren't simply royal luxury or aesthetic indulgence. They served as agricultural research and demonstration facilities where new crops, cultivation techniques, and irrigation methods were tested and refined before introduction to regional farming communities. This systematic approach to agricultural development ensured that innovations were appropriate for local conditions and needs before being implemented on scales that could affect food security and economic stability. Technological innovation flourished throughout the satrapies under Persian policies that encouraged practical improvement while respecting established traditions and maintaining quality standards. Local craftsmen and engineers shared techniques and discoveries through networks that connected artisans across the empire, creating continuous technological diffusion that improved productivity and living standards throughout Persian territories. This technology transfer occurred through voluntary adoption rather than imperial imposition, ensuring that innovations were adapted appropriately for local materials, conditions, and needs. The evening hours in satrapal palaces were often devoted to cultural activities that reinforced the empire's multicultural character while building the personal relationships that made complex administration possible. Persian poetry might be recited alongside local musical traditions, while dinner conversations conducted in multiple languages explored administrative challenges and shared solutions developed in different parts of the empire. These social gatherings weren't mere entertainment. They were essential networking opportunities that strengthened bonds connecting diverse elements of imperial administration while facilitating exchange of ideas and innovations. The afternoon sun cast elongated shadows across the royal chancery complex in Persepolis as imperial secretaries prepared the quarterly revenue reports that would provide central authorities with detailed assessments of economic conditions throughout the 23 satrapies. Each carefully prepared scroll represented far more than simple tribute calculations. These documents contained comprehensive analyses of regional prosperity, seasonal variations, trade developments, agricultural conditions, and the complex negotiations between imperial requirements and local economic realities that kept the empire functioning effectively across vast distances and diverse populations. The fiscal autonomy granted to individual satraps operated within sophisticated parameters that balanced local administrative discretion with imperial oversight and accountability. Each satrap received detailed annual tribute assessments based on careful calculations of their territory's economic capacity, but the specific mechanisms for collecting this tribute, the timing of payments, and the methods of assessing local economic conditions remained largely within satrapal discretion. This flexibility proved essential for accommodating the dramatic economic diversity that characterized the empire's territories, from the intensive agriculture of Mesopotamian river valleys to the pastoral wealth of Central Asian steppes to the commercial sophistication of Eastern Mediterranean trading centers. Consider the intricate revenue collection system developed by Hystaspes, satrap of Bactria, during the early years of Darius III's reign. The challenging geography and diverse population of his territory, encompassing settled agricultural communities in river valleys, nomadic pastoralists moving across seasonal grazing ranges, and prosperous trading centers along the developing silk routes connecting China with Western markets, required fundamentally different approaches to taxation and tribute collection. Rather than attempting to impose uniform systems that would inevitably prove inappropriate for such diverse economic activities, Hystaspes negotiated separate arrangements with each major population group within his satrap. Agricultural communities contributed grain, surpluses, livestock, and craft products according to traditional seasonal patterns that respected established farming cycles and local economic customs. These communities had operated sophisticated irrigation systems and crop rotation practices for centuries, and Persian administration enhanced rather than disrupted these established agricultural systems. Tribute assessments took account of annual variations in weather patterns, flood cycles, and other natural factors that affected agricultural productivity, ensuring that taxation demands didn't undermine the long-term sustainability of regional food production. Nomadic tribes provided horses, animal products, and access to grazing territories during their regular migration cycles, with tribute collection coordinated to coincide with seasonal gatherings when tribal leaders could assess their community's capacity to contribute to imperial revenues. This approach respected nomadic economic patterns, while ensuring that mobile populations contributed appropriately to imperial finances. Persian administrators developed remarkable expertise in understanding and working with nomadic economic systems, creating cooperative relationships that lasted for generations. Merchant communities operating along international trade routes paid commercial taxes based on transaction volumes, route usage, and the valuable services they provided in facilitating long-distance commerce. These assessments recognized that trade-based economies operated according to different principles than agricultural or pastoral systems, with revenues fluctuating according to political conditions in distant regions, seasonal demand for particular commodities, and the complex logistics of organizing commercial expeditions across vast distances. This multifaceted approach to revenue collection required sophisticated administrative capabilities that the Persian system deliberately cultivated through extensive training programs and institutional development. Hystaspes maintained large staffs of specialists trained in local commercial practices, agricultural techniques, pastoral economics, and tribal customs. The morning briefings in his palace at Bactria included detailed reports from grain assessors familiar with regional soil conditions and climate patterns, livestock evaluators who understood local breeding practices and animal husbandry techniques, and commercial inspectors who monitored the complex web of trade relationships extending from Chinese silk markets to Mediterranean commercial centers. The palace scribes and record keepers maintained comprehensive archives that tracked not only current revenue collection, but also long-term economic trends, demographic changes, and environmental factors that informed future policy decisions. These administrative records contained detailed weather observations, harvest reports, trade volume statistics, population data, and economic analysis that enabled satraps to anticipate economic fluctuations and adjust their policies accordingly. During years of drought, political instability in neighboring regions, or disruptions to trade routes, tribute assessments could be modified quickly to prevent economic hardship that might undermine political stability or long-term productivity. The communication networks linking individual satraps to central authority and to each other facilitated continuous dialogue about fiscal policy, economic conditions, and administrative innovations that improved governance throughout the empire. The famous Persian postal system carried far more than royal commands and policy directives. It enabled satraps to share successful administrative innovations, seek guidance on complex economic issues, and coordinate responses to challenges that affected multiple territories simultaneously. When locust swarms threatened agricultural production across several eastern satrapies, rapid communication allowed for coordinated relief efforts including temporary tribute reductions, grain shipments from surplus regions, public works projects to provide alternative employment, and diplomatic initiatives to secure additional food supplies from neighboring territories. This systematic approach to crisis management prevented localized problems from escalating into empire-wide instabilities. These information networks also facilitated policy learning that continuously improved administrative effectiveness across all imperial territories. Successful innovations developed in one satrap were quickly communicated to others facing similar challenges, while failed experiments were documented and analyzed to prevent repetition of ineffective policies. Irrigation techniques perfected in Mesopotamian agriculture were adapted for use in Bactrian and Sogdian farming communities, while commercial regulations developed in Lydian markets influenced trade policy throughout the western provinces. This systematic sharing of administrative knowledge created an empire-wide learning system that continuously evolved and improved governance quality. New satraps could benefit from the accumulated experience of their predecessors and colleagues, while experienced administrators contributed to collective knowledge through detailed reports on their successes and failures. This institutional memory preserved valuable lessons and prevented the loss of administrative expertise during personnel transitions. The evening council meetings held in major satrapal centers brought together administrators representing the empire's diverse constituencies and interests. Persian officials trained in imperial law and policy worked collaboratively with local experts familiar with regional customs, economic conditions, and social dynamics. These regular consultations produced administrative decisions that respected local traditions while advancing imperial interests, but the process required constant negotiation, compromise, and creative problem-solving. The delicate balance between central direction and local adaptation demanded continuous attention to changing circumstances and evolving needs. What worked effectively in one season or under particular conditions might require modification as circumstances changed. The flexibility built into the satrapal system enabled these adaptations while maintaining overall policy coherence and imperial authority. The role of local elites in satrapal administration exemplified the empire's sophisticated approach to political integration and its understanding that effective governance required local legitimacy and expertise. Rather than displacing existing leadership structures and attempting to govern through purely external authority, the Persian system incorporated local aristocracies, merchant leaders, religious authorities, and community representatives into imperial administration, creating stakeholder relationships that strengthened rather than weakened central control. Local nobles and community leaders served as essential intermediaries between Persian administrators and their populations, translating imperial policies into locally appropriate forms while communicating regional concerns, needs, and suggestions to satrapal authorities. This intermediary role required sophisticated political skills and deep understanding of both imperial expectations and local conditions, creating a class of administrators who were simultaneously loyal to Persian interests and responsive to local needs. The morning audiences, held regularly by satraps, included petitions from local leaders seeking redress for grievances, approval for development projects, modification of policies that created local difficulties, and guidance on implementing imperial directives within regional contexts. These sessions weren't mere ceremonial obligations or pro forma consultations. They were essential mechanisms for maintaining the empire's responsiveness to changing conditions and emerging needs throughout its territories. A Lydian merchant guild, seeking modifications to trade regulations, could present their case directly to the satrap, providing detailed information about how existing policies affected commercial activity and proposing alternative approaches that would better serve both local economic interests and imperial revenue requirements. The satrap might approve immediate adjustments within his authority or forward more complex issues to royal authorities for broader policy consideration, but the systematic availability of these consultative processes ensured that administrative policies remained practical and effective rather than becoming divorced from economic and social realities. Economic development policy within the satrapies reflected the empire's sophisticated long-term perspective on prosperity, stability, and sustainable tribute collection. Rather than maximizing short-term revenue extraction that might undermine future economic capacity, Persian administration consistently invested in infrastructure development, institutional improvement, and technological innovation that enhanced regional productive capacity while also serving imperial administrative and military needs. The construction of roads, bridges, irrigation systems, port facilities, and other infrastructure required immediate capital expenditure and diverted resources from current tribute collection. But these investments generated increased prosperity over time that supported higher tribute payments while improving living conditions and economic opportunities for local populations. This long-term approach to economic development distinguished Persian administration from more exploitative imperial systems that prioritized immediate resource extraction over sustainable prosperity. The famous Persian road network exemplified this approach to development investment and its multiple benefits for both local populations and imperial administration. While these roads obviously served crucial military functions, enabling rapid troop movements, efficient supply lines, and effective communication between administrative centers, their primary long-term impact involved facilitating commercial activity that increased prosperity throughout the empire. Regional merchants could transport goods more efficiently between local markets and distant commercial centers, while producers gained access to previously unreachable customers and suppliers. Commercial information flowed more rapidly along these improved transportation networks, enabling better business decisions and more efficient resource allocation. The increased commercial activity generated higher tax revenues, while also creating employment opportunities and improving living standards for populations throughout the empire. The maintenance and continuous improvement of these infrastructure networks required ongoing coordination between multiple satrapies and central authorities, creating cooperative relationships that strengthened imperial unity while serving practical local needs. Seasonal maintenance crews, security patrols, and supply stations operated according to empire-wide standards while adapting to local geographic conditions and weather patterns. The morning dispatches from road supervisors contained detailed reports on traffic volume, maintenance requirements, security conditions, and economic activity that helped satraps optimize their territorial development policies and coordinate with neighboring administrators. Currency policy within the satrapies revealed another dimension of Persian administrative sophistication and the empire's nuanced approach to economic integration. Rather than immediately imposing uniform monetary systems that might disrupt established commercial relationships and trading practices, the empire accommodated existing regional currencies while establishing exchange standards and commercial protocols that gradually facilitated inter-regional economic integration. The prestigious Persian darik served as a standard currency for major transactions, tribute payments, and inter-regional commerce, but local currencies continued to circulate for daily commercial activity and small-scale transactions. This monetary pluralism supported economic stability by allowing established commercial relationships to continue functioning within familiar frameworks, while gradually creating the standardization necessary for efficient empire-wide trade and economic coordination. The afternoon markets in major satrapal cities showcased the empire's remarkable economic dynamism and the success of policies that made cultural diversity economically productive rather than administratively problematic. Merchants from across the known world conducted business using multiple currencies, languages, and commercial traditions within regulatory frameworks that protected legitimate commercial activity while generating appropriate revenues for both imperial and local administration. The bustling commercial activity in these markets reflected not simply Persian tolerance for diversity, but active policies that made diversity a source of economic strength and innovation. Different cultural approaches to commerce, craft production, and resource management could interact creatively, generating new techniques, products, and commercial relationships that benefited all participants while contributing to overall imperial prosperity. Legal administration within the satrapies required constant navigation between imperial law and diverse local legal traditions, creating sophisticated jurisprudence that respected cultural differences while maintaining consistent standards of justice and imperial authority. The evening legal consultations held in satrapal palaces often involved complex cases requiring interpretation of how Persian imperial law intersected with local customs, traditional legal precedents, and the practical requirements of governing multicultural populations. Rather than simply imposing Persian legal codes that might conflict with local values and expectations, the administration developed nuanced approaches to legal pluralism that integrated multiple legal traditions while ensuring consistent treatment of similar cases across different territories. This process required extensive legal scholarship, careful documentation of precedents and decisions, and ongoing consultation between legal experts representing different cultural traditions. The training of legal administrators reflected this pluralistic approach to justice and the empire's commitment to competent, culturally sensitive governance. Young men preparing for careers in satrapal legal administration studied Persian imperial law alongside local legal traditions and often examined legal precedents and administrative practices from other parts of the empire. This comprehensive legal education produced administrators capable of making decisions that were simultaneously respectful of local traditions and consistent with imperial policy goals. The resolution of commercial disputes showcased the practical benefits of this sophisticated approach to legal pluralism. Conflicts between merchants from different cultural backgrounds required understanding of multiple commercial traditions, legal systems, and business practices. Satrapal courts developed remarkable expertise in cross-cultural commercial law that facilitated inter-regional trade while maintaining justice standards acceptable to diverse commercial communities. These legal innovations influenced commercial practices throughout the ancient world and contributed significantly to the expansion of long-distance trade that characterized the Persian period. Merchants could conduct business across cultural boundaries with confidence that disputes would be resolved fairly according to consistent principles, even when the specific legal traditions involved differed significantly. Religious administration within the satrapies demonstrated the empire's sophisticated understanding of the relationship between spiritual legitimacy and political authority in diverse societies. The morning religious ceremonies conducted in satrapal palaces honored both Persian and local deities according to appropriate traditions, creating environments of mutual religious respect that strengthened rather than undermined political authority. This approach to religious pluralism wasn't simple tolerance or political expedience. It represented strategic policy, recognizing that political stability in diverse societies required spiritual legitimacy that could only be achieved through genuine respect for local religious traditions. Satraps served simultaneously as protectors of local temples and sacred sites, and as promoters of Persian religious practices, creating religious environments where multiple spiritual traditions could coexist and mutually reinforce, rather than undermine imperial authority. The evening religious festivals, celebrated throughout satrapal territories, combined Persian and local elements in ways that honored all traditions while creating shared experiences that reinforced imperial unity and local identity simultaneously. These celebrations weren't imposed from above or artificially constructed. They emerged from collaborative planning between Persian administrators and local religious authorities who worked together to create events that felt authentic and meaningful to all participants. The education and professional development of administrative personnel reflected the empire's systematic commitment to cultural competence and governmental excellence. The palace schools established in major satrapal centers provided comprehensive training that combined Persian administrative traditions with local cultural knowledge and often included instruction in additional languages and customs from other parts of the empire. This educational approach produced administrators capable of functioning effectively in the empire's complex, multicultural environment while maintaining loyalty to imperial principles and objectives. Graduates of these schools could communicate effectively with diverse populations, understand and work within different cultural frameworks, and adapt imperial policies to local conditions, without undermining central authority or policy coherence. The recruitment of administrative staff drew strategically from both Persian and local populations, creating bureaucracies that combined imperial loyalty and expertise with regional knowledge and cultural competence. Local administrators brought intimate understanding of community traditions, economic patterns, and social dynamics, while Persian officials contributed training in imperial policies and experience in coordinating with central authorities and other satrapal administrations. This collaborative approach to administrative staffing produced governmental decisions that were simultaneously well-informed about local conditions and needs and consistent with broader imperial objectives and policies. The resulting administrative quality contributed significantly to the empire's longevity and the general prosperity that characterized Persian territories, compared to regions under less sophisticated governmental systems. Agricultural policy within the satrapies showcased the empire's nuanced understanding of rural economics and the critical importance of maintaining food security while fostering agricultural innovation and productivity improvement. Rather than imposing uniform agricultural practices, that might prove inappropriate for diverse environmental and social conditions, satraps worked collaboratively with local farmers, landowners, and agricultural experts to improve productivity through techniques and crops that were appropriate for specific regional conditions. The famous Persian gardens served as practical research and demonstration facilities where new agricultural methods, irrigation techniques, and crop varieties were tested and refined before introduction to regional farming communities. This systematic approach to agricultural development ensured that innovations were proven effective and appropriate for local conditions before being implemented on scales that could affect food security and economic stability. The seasonal agricultural cycles required continuous coordination between satrapal authorities and farming communities throughout the empire. Spring planting decisions, summer irrigation management, and autumn harvest planning all involved ongoing negotiations between imperial revenue requirements and local agricultural traditions, weather patterns, and environmental conditions. This collaborative approach to agricultural administration ensured food security while respecting farming practices that had evolved over centuries of local experience and environmental adaptation. The resulting agricultural prosperity supported both local populations and imperial tribute requirements while maintaining the environmental sustainability necessary for long-term economic stability. The integration of nomadic populations within satrapal territories required particularly sophisticated policies that accommodated seasonal migration patterns, pastoral economic systems, and traditional social structures while maintaining imperial security and ensuring appropriate tribute collection. Rather than forcing nomadic peoples into settled lifestyles that would destroy their economic systems and cultural traditions, Persian administration developed innovative approaches that worked cooperatively with nomadic patterns and practices. Tribute collection was coordinated to coincide with seasonal gatherings when tribal leaders could assess their community's capacity to contribute to imperial revenues without disrupting migration patterns or pastoral activities. Security arrangements protected nomadic routes and grazing areas while ensuring that mobile populations contributed appropriately to imperial defense and administrative costs. This flexible approach to nomadic administration prevented the destructive conflicts between mobile and settled populations that plagued other ancient empires, and created instead mutually beneficial relationships that lasted for generations. Nomadic tribes provided military service, intelligence about frontier conditions, and access to resources from distant regions, while receiving protection, trade opportunities, and participation in the broader imperial economy. The evening diplomatic receptions, hosted by satraps, brought together representatives from all the diverse communities within their territories, as well as visitors from neighboring regions and distant parts of the empire. These elaborate social gatherings served crucial political and economic functions, facilitating communication between different groups, enabling satraps to monitor regional political developments, and creating the personal relationships that made complex, multicultural administration possible. The multilingual conversations at these events reflected the cosmopolitan character of Persian administration and the empire's success in creating shared interests among populations that might otherwise have remained isolated or hostile to each other. Persian officials conversed with local aristocrats. Merchant leaders discussed trade opportunities with nomadic tribal representatives, and religious authorities from different traditions found common ground in their shared roles as community leaders. These diplomatic receptions weren't simply social entertainment. They were essential tools of governance that enabled satraps to maintain awareness of developing issues, identify potential problems before they became serious, and build the coalitions of local support that made effective administration possible. The informal intelligence gathered at these events often proved more valuable than formal reports, while the personal relationships developed through regular social interaction created trust and cooperation that facilitated difficult administrative decisions. Craftsmanship and artistic production flourished throughout the satrapies under Persian patronage policies that encouraged regional traditions while facilitating cultural exchange and technological innovation. Local artisans continued producing goods according to traditional techniques and aesthetic preferences, but they also incorporated elements and influences from other parts of the empire, creating distinctive fusion styles that reflected the creative possibilities opened by imperial cultural diversity. The markets in major satrapal cities displayed products that represented artistic traditions from across the known world, while local workshops developed new techniques by combining traditional methods with innovations learned from craftsmen representing different cultural backgrounds. Persian administration actively encouraged this artistic cross-fertilization by sponsoring exchanges between regional craft centers and providing economic incentives for innovation and quality improvement. The resulting artistic production achieved standards of technical excellence and aesthetic sophistication that influenced cultural development throughout the ancient world. Persian carpets, metalwork, jewelry, textiles, and wand ceramic production became renowned for their quality and beauty, while local artistic traditions gained new vitality through contact with broader cultural networks and access to materials and techniques from distant regions. Military administration within the satrapies demonstrated the empire's sophisticated approach to security that balanced local defense needs with imperial strategic requirements, while creating military forces that were both effective in regional conditions and loyal to central authority. Regional military units, recruited from local populations, provided intimate knowledge of terrain, weather patterns, and tactical conditions that external forces could never possess, while Persian garrison troops ensured that regional military capabilities remained aligned with imperial interests and policies. This dual military structure created multiple layers of security and redundancy that strengthened rather than weakened imperial control, while providing local populations with effective protection and career opportunities within imperial service. Local military leaders could advance through merit within imperial hierarchies, while their forces gained access to superior equipment, training, and coordination with broader strategic planning. The training and equipment of regional military forces reflected the empire's practical approach to security that emphasized effectiveness over uniformity. Rather than imposing standardized Persian military practices that might prove inappropriate for local conditions, satraps developed force structures that combined imperial military doctrine with local tactical knowledge and traditional fighting methods. This flexible approach to military organization produced forces that were simultaneously effective in local geographic and political conditions and capable of coordinating with imperial military operations when larger conflicts required unified response. The resulting military capabilities contributed significantly to the empire's defensive strength while also providing security for local populations and economic activities. The coordination of security policies across multiple satrapies required constant communication and cooperation between regional administrators who shared intelligence, coordinated responses to cross-border threats, and maintained the diplomatic relationships that prevented local conflicts from escalating into larger problems. Threats affecting border regions often required responses involving multiple territories and central authorities, while the rapid communication networks connecting satraps to each other and to Persepolis enabled coordinated responses to security challenges that might otherwise have overwhelmed individual territories. Trade route security exemplified this cooperative approach to imperial administration and the economic benefits that resulted from effective coordination between different administrative levels. Commercial highways passing through multiple satrapies required coordinated security arrangements that protected merchant caravans while ensuring that each territory benefited appropriately from commercial activity passing through their jurisdictions. The morning merchant caravans departing from major cities throughout the empire traveled under security arrangements that spanned multiple satrapies and were backed by diplomatic agreements that resolved disputes quickly and fairly. This comprehensive approach to commercial protection created the stable conditions necessary for long-distance trade while generating revenues that supported both local economies and imperial administration. The technological innovations encouraged and facilitated by Persian administration reflected the empire's commitment to practical improvement and its understanding that technological progress required knowledge sharing and collaborative development. Irrigation techniques, metallurgical methods, construction practices, and craft production technologies were systematically shared between regions through networks that connected administrators, artisans, scholars, and merchants across the empire. This technology transfer occurred through voluntary adoption and adaptation rather than imperial imposition, ensuring that innovations were modified appropriately for local materials, environmental conditions, and social contexts. The resulting technological progress improved productivity and living standards throughout the empire while maintaining the cultural diversity that made different regions distinctive and valuable. The evening scholarly gatherings held in major satrapal centers brought together intellectuals from across the empire to discuss administrative challenges, technological innovations, cultural developments, and philosophical questions. These intellectual exchanges contributed to the continuous improvement of imperial administration while respecting the diversity of traditions and approaches that made the empire successful. These scholarly discussions often produced practical solutions to administrative problems as well as theoretical insights that influenced policy development throughout the empire. The systematic documentation and dissemination of these intellectual achievements created an imperial culture of learning and improvement that attracted scholars and intellectuals from throughout the known world. The legacy of Persian administrative innovation extended far beyond the Achaemenid period and influenced governmental development throughout subsequent history. The fundamental insight that effective governance of diverse populations requires balancing central coordination with local autonomy continued to influence administrative thinking through successive empires and remains relevant to contemporary discussions about federalism, regional autonomy, and multicultural governance. The Roman Empire adopted and adapted many Persian administrative practices, while Islamic caliphates, Mongol empires, and modern federal systems have all grappled with similar challenges of governing diverse populations across vast territories. The Persian achievement lay not in eliminating the inherent tensions between unity and diversity, but in creating institutional frameworks that made these tensions productive rather than destructive. The specific mechanisms developed by Persian administrators, flexible tribute systems, cultural pluralism in legal and religious policy, sophisticated communication networks, collaborative decision-making processes, and long-term investment in economic development provided practical solutions to governmental challenges that continue to face contemporary states attempting to balance central authority with local autonomy. Modern federal systems, international organizations, and multicultural societies can learn valuable lessons from Persian administrative innovations, particularly the understanding that diversity can be a source of strength rather than weakness when appropriate institutional frameworks are developed to manage and channel different traditions and interests constructively. The quiet efficiency of satrapal administration, the patient negotiations between imperial and local authorities, the careful balance of tribute requirements and regional prosperity, the sophisticated legal systems that respected multiple traditions while maintaining consistent standards, all of these administrative achievements demonstrated that complex societies could be governed effectively through cooperation rather than coercion, through flexibility rather than rigidity, through respect for diversity rather than imposed uniformity. As the evening shadows lengthen across our exploration of this remarkable administrative system, we begin to understand how the Persian Empire achieved something that continues to challenge modern governments: the successful integration of vast, diverse territories through governmental structures that strengthened, rather than suppressed, local traditions and identities, while maintaining effective central coordination and imperial unity. The gentle rhythm of daily administrative routines, the soft voices of multilingual scribes recording decisions and communications, the measured conversations between officials representing different cultural traditions and regional interests. Let these sounds of ancient bureaucracy guide you now toward peaceful rest as we conclude our journey through the sophisticated world of Persian imperial administration. The empire that stretched from the rising sun to its setting succeeded not through force alone, but through the patient cultivation of governmental systems that made diversity a source of strength rather than division, that created prosperity through cooperation rather than exploitation, that maintained unity through respect for difference rather than imposed conformity. As you drift towards sleep, let your mind wander through those ancient palace halls where administrators from across the known world worked together to govern justly and effectively, where different languages blended in harmonious conversation, where diverse traditions were honored while common purposes were pursued. Feel the warmth of Persian sunlight streaming through palace windows onto scrolls and tablets recording the daily business of empire. Hear the gentle scratching of reed pens on papyrus as scribes documented decisions that would affect millions of lives across thousands of miles. Imagine the satisfaction of problems solved through patient negotiation and creative compromise, the quiet pride of administrators who knew their work contributed to prosperity and justice for diverse populations, the deep contentment that comes from serving purposes larger than oneself while respecting the dignity and worth of all peoples under imperial protection. Rest now in the knowledge that human beings have successfully navigated the complex challenges of governing diversity, that the problems we face today have been faced before and solved through wisdom, patience, and respect for human dignity. Let the gentle voices of ancient administrators fade into peaceful silence as you embrace the restful sleep that follows understanding, the deep peace that comes from glimpsing the possibilities for human cooperation and justice that echo across the centuries from those quiet administrative chambers to our present moment. The Persian achievement reminds us that effective governance requires not the suppression of diversity, but its transformation into collaborative strength, not the imposition of uniformity, but the creation of frameworks within which different traditions can contribute to common prosperity. Sleep peacefully in this knowledge, and let these ancient lessons of administrative wisdom carry you gently into dreams of justice, cooperation, and the enduring human capacity for creating societies that honor both unity and diversity, both central purpose and local identity, both imperial vision and regional belonging.